Is Claude 2 better than GPT-4 by OpenAI or PaLM2 by Google? Let's find out. Hi, this is Junaid, neurocritical stroke and epilepsy specialist, and today we're going to talk about the company called behind Claude models, and that is Anthropic. They just released their most latest version called Claude 2, and thankfully that they have actually released a model card. Now, before we get into this paper by Anthropic and what it means, etc., let's figure out what a model card is in the first place. So this is Claude 2. This was by July 11th, 2023. This is one of the biggest things that I was looking forward to. And I understand that a few of my colleagues were also looking as far as the interesting work that is Anthropic is coming. Now, Anthropic is a company that was built by three people that came out of OpenAI with the concerns of basically alignment and how the safety of these models need to be improved, interestingly. And also, very more interestingly, I think Google is one of the earliest investors in Anthropic. So it is becoming a really hard situation where things are in terms of who owns what, etc. But long story short, Claude 2 is out and it is by Anthropic, which I personally am one of the very excited about discussing this paper with you guys. Now, what is a model card? Now, model card was basically designed to create model reporting. So for example, if I'm designing a large language model, I need to tell users of what it is about. And that's like a nutritional label. Like if you take a piece of nutrition, a candy bar or something at the back, you'll see a nutrition label that tells you exactly what is in it. Are you allergic to peanuts? And are you allergic to something in this particular large language model? So that's the whole point behind creating these model cards, that there is a succinct, standardized, universal way of reporting what these large language models are all about. This is an example of a model card over here. They're talking about model details like date, versions, etc., licenses, blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, most importantly, we need to make sure that we are looking at the intended use. What is the primary user and what is the out of scope use cases? So therefore, when people are reporting these, cases in different places, we need to make sure that they are not reporting BS. And I've seen that with especially very small large language models that are used over ChatGPT, fine-tuned, etc., that they are basically starting to making fun of these models by giving them the wrong input. The whole idea behind it is that you are evaluating these models on the basis of what the primary intended use is, and therefore not making a mockery of things. Of course, there are things that we use Google for, clearly web search, etc., but we don't use Google to turn a screw. It's that simple. So what is the intended user, and therefore you have to evaluate these models accordingly. Now, factors what are involved in terms of demographics, phenotype, groups, etc., that were discussed, environmental conditions. The whole idea is that what are the relevant factors and evaluation factors that went into creating that model report? What were the metrics used? So again, if you have to compare from one model to another model, in the future, you have this ability to do so, because otherwise we did not have it before. Now, coming to then we are looking at the evaluation data, like how it was evaluated, data sets, motivation, improvement. Then clearly important, and it is getting more and more important in these situations where large language models are using public data or private data, or did they license it? How did they acquire it, etc.? Much more important in healthcare than general large language models that we talk about. And then what were the results? And then what was the quantitative analysis and how it was done? And more importantly, all models should tell you that what are the ethical considerations within that model, biases, racial bias, ethnic bias, etc. And what are the caveats and recommendations? Again, the idea is that these large language models are, believe it or not, a lot more art than science itself. So the idea is that we are able to use them appropriately in certain cases and also avoid some of those things. So therefore, this becomes like a nutrition label for a large language model. Now, one of the things that before I get into this, because that's going to be the whole theme of this particular, so when they're going to go into this, they're going to look at three things, and that's basically helpful, harmless, and honest. We're going to get into that, but one of the major things with large language models is to reduce harm, because that's one of the key issues that we are doing it. Anthropic actually came up with what we call red teaming language. And this is, again, we can go into this, put it in the description down below if you want to really understand what red teaming in terms of language models is concerned, and I can do a whole dedicated video. Having said that, interestingly, OpenAI has also done this superalignment, and their approach has been to provide training signals on tasks that is difficult for humans to evaluate, and therefore assist evaluation of by other AI systems. Okay, so basically we're creating AIs that are evaluating other AIs, and therefore we want to make sure that there is not something that we are missing. One of the reasons they say that it is completely impossible, I'm going to come to the next, what Anthropic's underlying framework, what they call constitutional AI, is all about. And to validate these alignment system, we have to have automatic search for probabilistic behavior, robustness, and problematic interpretability is extremely important. Again, these are larger concepts that I can get into discussing 3 or 4 papers combined together, and then you understand how things go. Again, interestingly, that Google, the DeepMind, also in 2022 used red teaming models with their large language models, and that's why they use the word red teaming again over here as well. Given that we are actually looking at Anthropic, and one of the reasons I like one of their models is because that their constitutional AI was the first to discuss what we call harmlessness, and the way they discuss this is from AI feedback. So it's not just based on humans, RHLF, which is reinforced learning from human feedback, but there is mainly through constitutional AI, and they discuss the evolution in harmlessness from mainly human feedback and of course AI feedback as well. Again, this is something that we can discuss this if you guys like. And then we can go from there. I think this is one of those papers that everyone should read, how the evolution of large language models is going to come through in the next decade or so, because interestingly, AI will be providing feedback on the AI, and therefore we're going to have this alignment problem solved. I don't know how that's going to function, but oh well, we live in interesting times. So constitutional, because we are able to train less harmful systems entirely through the specification of a short list of principles and instructions, that is constitution. So they define a constitution, and that constitution becomes basically the idea behind creating a harmlessness in a model itself. And they did this whole study where there was a standard RLHF, and then constitutional reinforcement, and they found that it is definitely the helplessness and the harmlessness, and it was able to perform better in terms of that. One of the other things that I want to point out, that Anthropic as a company is very sensitive about doing what I'm very sensitive about is cybersecurity. So there is basically a cybersecurity framework, which is SOC 2 Type 1. And of course, interestingly, they are HIPAA compliant as well. So they are going into the market as far as that is concerned. Now, let's get back into this particular paper so that we are not missing anything. So the idea is that they have a family of Claude models, and then the first one is basically Claude 2. And then they have done the first work on RLHF, and the newest model proves continuous evolution of those early and example harmlessness language assistants. Again, they're going to use that language a lot, so you're going to feel that they're going to keep talking about harmlessness and harmfulness a lot. Within this report, this is not intended to be a scientific paper. That's important. This is not a scientific paper. This is a model card. So I told you what a model card is. It is a nutrition label published by the company. Is there a reason for it? I'm glad they did it. I wish GPT-4, GPT 3.5, ChatGPT, PaLM2, IBM, Watson X, everyone did publish this. So this is not essentially a scientific paper like I discussed for, or a technical report, right? So there's a scientific paper, there's a technical report, and then there's a model card. This is not even a technical report. So the information is still fairly, missing in terms of a complete sort of technical assessment of Claude 2 model. They go through all of their previous research in this paragraph, and they actually say that the red teaming and, of course, discovering behavior, and I'm not going to get into that how model behaviors are changing because of the written evaluations, etc., that how this is important in terms of creating the second version of their Claude 2 model. There's, of course, every time they come up with the most capable system yet, and I believe that I've used it. I'm very, very impressed by it. As a matter of fact, for coding, it is probably one of the best models right now, unless I'm missing anything, and describe the evaluations and safety interventions as far as improve helpfulness, honesty, and harmlessness. And that is the key core feature of what Anthropic is going behind. As a matter of fact, the whole point of making this company out of OpenAI was to discuss these things of helpfulness and, more importantly, harmlessness. And that's where they're gonna constantly talk about that. So number one, it is a general purpose large language model, right? So it is not like a legal large language model, medical large language model. This is just a general purpose. And then they have used unsupervised learning, human feedback, constitutional AI that I talked about, which includes both supervised and reinforcement learning phases. So the whole point of developing a constitutional AI was to actually challenge the primary AI so that it remains aligned in terms of producing results. The intended use is, again, that is very important, is general, open-ended conversation, search, writing, editing, outlining, summarizing, etc. is suited to for creative and literary uses. Again, I'm glad that they put that intended use. Unintended use is because that it does confabulate. Be careful. It does not have access to the search, so it could be outdated. And then it has some multilingual capabilities, but you have to look at the report that they suggest that if that particular language is fully supported and what their results are before directly publishing the multilingual capabilities of these models. Again, I'm glad that somebody's doing that because this is important information for me if I'm going to choose Claude or not. I don't have this information for GPT-4, PaLM2, or Lambda, or whatever that comes in the future. So I'm very glad that they have taken this route in terms of this. Ethical considerations, this is important as well. As I told you that, they are very, Claude was imperfect, it still make mistakes, etc., and they actually outline this in an acceptable use policy. Again, very nice that at least that it included this information for us users, end users, or even, and one day, if I can collaborate with them to fine tune our medical model, I would choose a company like this because that they are very upfront on what their capabilities are and not are. I mean, look, everything has risk and benefit. I mean, I'm a stroke physician. I do high intensity, high risk medications all the time. That's my primary job. That doesn't mean we stop doing it. We treat patients, but we tell them, we consent them that, hey, there's a 2% risk of bleeding in the brain, or because there's a 8% risk of bleeding in the brain, or I don't know what the risk of bleeding in the brain. However, these are your options. This is how life works. If you walk or cross a road, there is a chance you're going to be hit by a bus. Small or high, it does not matter. There is a chance. And therefore, what we do in life, typically everywhere, is to balance risk versus benefits. And this is why I love this. They talk about the training data, again, mix of publicly available information, some licensed third-party stuff that they use, etc. And then, of course, they use all the red teaming and RLHF. Evaluation and red teaming. Now, again, red teaming is the whole point of red teaming is harmlessness. The idea behind it is to make the model less disruptive, less offensive language, less of hatred speech, less racial bias, less ethnic bias. The whole point of red teaming was that you are aligning the whole model responses to make sure that you are more helpful and less harmful. That's the whole point. So what they ended up doing is that they did capability evaluation, strengths, weaknesses, etc. They red teamed the Claude 2 with previous Claude models for several national security and safety related risks and found out. They also have been working with alignment research for this particular purposes. They also assigned an external red teamers, which were basically cloud work platforms to test that what is the trust and safety of this particular product that they're putting out, which again, as we know, these are very, very powerful products in terms of generalized large language models. The way that they evaluated is ELO Score. I don't know if you're aware of that. ELO Score is basically used mainly in chess that to really get behind from a statistical level that what is the player's specific technical expertise. And we use that all the time. ELO score is also used significantly for risk evaluations a lot. So if you are doing specific risk evaluations, if there are any actuarial sciences over here, they're going to use ELO risk, one of the ways that they evaluate risk on a masses level. They use Claude responses to per turn using which is better, and then they provide the instructions. So what they ended up doing is that they gave this responses to crowd workers, and then they were able to choose between the responses per instruction that, hey, is this bad, good, worse, etc. And they're going to basically compare through the whole thing. The main three things that they're working on is helpful, harmless, and honest. And within all three of them, with the human feedback evaluations, clearly, I mean, human is going to evaluate this. Who else is going to evaluate it? What we found out that if the model, as far as the Claude 2 is concerned, it is more helpful, it is less harmless, and overall it is more honest in terms of saying that, hey, this is the information max I can get. I don't know if I can get more information. You should get more information somewhere else. They also looked at biases. Again, bias is a huge issue in terms of making sure that we are not looking at ethnic biases, etc. This is a massive issue in healthcare specifically. Having said that, the bias scores, when you have just the helpful, there was massive bias. And that's understandable, right? Because then you're not limiting the responses with anything, right? You just say it. If it's biased, it's biased. And therefore, since you're not limiting by anything, they are able to give responses that are more helpful. But when you put guardrails on it, when you put that, on the horse that, hey, don't go too fast, make sure you work on this, etc., at that point in time, your responses, your throughput is going to become stunted. And that's what happened exactly. But what they were able to do with Claude 2 was that they were able to, for Claude 1.3, you can see helpfulness was better. But again, these are, in terms of just age, these are the biases that you were still able to see. And overall, they were able to improve helpfulness and decrease bias in Claude 2 as compared to priors. The BBA is that Truthful QA is an evaluation that they have used before. Some other models have used that before to basically, are they outputting accurate and truthful responses in adversarial settings? So again, most of this stuff is now being tested with one AI through another adversarial AI. And they were able to see that it was definitely much better in terms of performance. Again, this is the company that is doing this information. I'm not related to them. This is not a sponsored event. But again, I told you that just publishing this report makes me more trend towards using them as compared to other models. As far as the truthfulness is concerned, as you can see that they have improved from Claude 1.3 from 62 to 69. It's not that huge of a gap. I mean, it could just be because they have more data and more recent data in Claude 2, because this was released in, I think, July. So they actually say that the data was till January or, early 2023. Just that might itself have increased the truthfulness score because it has more new data as far as that is concerned. The whole thing, in term, again, harmlessness evaluation, 238 binary questions were chosen, and then they were able to see, again, when you are doing red teaming evaluations, just purely making sure that you untame the model and then just spit out. Of course, untamed model will be generally a little bit more helpful. However, they were able to see that the Claude 2, because of the red teaming, overall decreased the harmlessness a lot more. Combined HHH evaluations, and this is one of the key things that they were looking at. And as you can see, Claude 2 is making progress slowly, especially on zero shot. Zero shot is like you ask the first question, you get the right answer the first time. I don't believe that how that large language model works. This is not Google. You are supposed to have a conversation with them. And therefore, I think that at least 3 shots or 5 shots is a better evaluation in terms of large language models. Interestingly, most of the people don't think so. We are so trained to think of computers through a Google's lens that we want zero shot as one of the key things to get the information. But again, this is not how it should have born this tool. Again, you have to learn the tool and how to use it effectively. Multilingual translations, interestingly, they were good in French, Portuguese, Jewish, Welsh, Danish, etc. Hindi and Egyptian Arabic is there, but overall the scores are fairly low. In terms of comparison, I don't think so that Claude 2 is any slightly better in terms of Hindi between the two, and then same thing with Egyptians. And of course, overall, I don't see that as massive improvements have been seen in terms of Claude 2 as compared to their prior models. One of the things that I was always excited about is longer context windows. Claude 1 actually had 1,000K context window, which is about 75,000 words. And they actually increased that by 150,000 words when they actually released this to 2,000 tokens. Now, this is massive when we are looking at healthcare, when we're looking at an EMR of a multiple sclerosis patient that has been there for 12 years. They don't have, there's a book written on an EMR on that patient because there's massive and massive amounts of data that you have to file through, just summarizing that. I mean, as a resident, I hated going to the multiple sclerosis clinic because you just have to sit there and read about that patient for 45, sometimes even an hour, because if it's an old a patient in their 80s and have had multiple sclerosis since the age of 40, you're looking at figuring out what information you need for a long time. Sometimes you have to look at 3-4 different MRIs, you have to go into different systems, etc. So I love large language models that have larger context window, larger tokens. So, but again, there has been recent research. I'll put that in the next video or so, maybe not, I don't know. It is not that helpful sometimes, the large context windows, at least in my opinion, for medical. If that truly does help, we should really look into, from a healthcare perspective, that this is important. The other place that it is very important, a largest context window, is coding. You can literally put your whole library in there and then ask the large language model to do basically, find out where the problems are and then fix them as we go along. Standard benchmarks have been used, that they go through that, trivia QA and airesearch and etc. These are again different models that we have done it. GRE is one of the popular way to actually do that. They have done again 5-shot and 2 shots. Again, they were within the 95 percentile. Multi-step bar examination. Again, this was not bad. 76.5%. I forgot to include PaLM2, but again, this is pretty decent. USMLE. Step 1, 2, 3. It's about this scores. Not bad. I think PaLM2 had a better score on USMLE. Specifically met PaLM2, but this is not bad. Again, this is on 5-shot, which was very interesting that step 1 and step 3 had similar results. And step 2 is lower, which is odd because I think step 1 and step 2 are more memory based, and step 3 is all more about clinical reasoning. Oh well, and truly, I think all of these tests are bullshit because it doesn't really tell you. There are multiple studies after studies that your SAT scores does get you into the right school, but at the end of the day, people, when you get in there, then the SAT scores don't matter. Yes, so USMLEs are important just to say that yes, you are a doctor and you can be a doctor. After that, these board exams, all of this is pure garbage, and especially with these large language models, I don't know what their utility is going to be in the future. Lag behind the state of the art on coding tasks. That's what they admit, that Claude 2 was not good. Claude 2, they significantly improved that. One of the things they say that they also not included the input tokens. They doubled it from 1,000 tokens to 2,000 tokens. 100,000 tokens to 200,000 tokens, but the output was improved from 3,000 words to 4,000. Retrained short response. Many users requested longer output, has generated coherent tokens up to 4,000 tokens, 3,000 words. So when they generate a response to 3,000 words, this is very good. The longer you go, you miss up the ability of accurately predicting it. So not only they increase the input tokens, they also increase the output tokens. So again, this is something really nice to see. They also point out some areas of improvement. It does confabulate. It still has biases. It has factual errors, and it has been jailbroken. Thank you so much for following me through this video. If you want to connect with me, the LinkedIn, this is the QR code. This is the best place to connect with me as far as having a conversation, just introduce yourself. I would like to make sure that you do know that NeuroChat, our mobile application, is out. It does have Claude AI. It does not have Claude 2. We are working on getting access to it. And then you can scan this QR code. It will be available on multiple different platforms. One of the things that we're working on is biomedical research. And then, of course, this is something that we're currently in beta release. And once we are fully ready, you're going to see announcements everywhere. Again, thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate it.